The state of our national parks in 2009 is, we have a lot of work to do, but we have a great vision for the future. President Obama understands and recognizes the importance of our national parks. We know that our national parks bring in over 300 million visitors a year. They are America's best idea, and national parks create the opportunity of unifying the American spirit. And so we have been very pleased that President Obama and his family decided that as part of their summer they would actually visit the national parks and to put a spotlight on the national parks, because it is a unifying American idea, fundamentally democratic, and very much a part of our future.
Hey, how are you? How are you?
Hi.
I have great memories of being here. I was 11. My grandma, my mom, and my sister who was with us. She was 8 at the time. We traveled throughout the country the entire summer. This was our last stop and my favorite stop.
The national parks, to me, I think, are studies in leadership. How presidents have related to the national parks have been in some ways defining aspects of their larger leadership quality.
Well, I think it's always special when a president visits anywhere. Chester A. Arthur was the first to visit Yellowstone in 1883. President Theodore Roosevelt came in 1903. Then in 1923, Warren Harding. In 1927, Silent Calvin Coolidge visited us. Then in 1937, FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, came.
President Franklin D. Roosevelt, swinging through the West on a campaign tour, took time out for a visit to Yellowstone National Park. An exponent of conservation, Mr. Roosevelt backed many measures aimed at enlarging our national forests and preserving wildlife. This was a moment of relaxation amid the scenes he loved.
This is a moment that I've been looking forward to for a long, long time. To return to Yellowstone, where I spent one of the greatest summers of my life.
Gerald Ford was an interesting example of a president because he had been a park ranger in Yellowstone. Then after Ford, Jimmy Carter came to Yellowstone and was again fishing was his primary focus. After Carter, George Herbert Walker Bush, who came to Yellowstone in 1989. Bill Clinton was here twice.
Yellowstone is the symbol of our national parks because it's the oldest one and the first one in the history of the world.
And then after Bill Clinton, of course, we had President Barack Obama.
Rotten eggs.
So why don't we have Katie explain to everybody why it smells like eggs and why it looks so hot?
Why it looks so hot? It looks so hot because it is, and because we're on a volcano. We're standing on top of a volcano that still has molten rock a couple of miles down, much closer than any place else in North America.
I think what's really important with the presidential visit is the focus of attention on resource protection. And I think that's really what Yellowstone's all about, is protecting these resources, because these things here are pretty darn special. They're like no place else on Earth. And you know, you would think a place like Yellowstone historically would, because it has the deep history, would be invulnerable or invincible to dangers, and that's just not the case.
Under this president's leadership, we were able to move forward to invest in our parks in a way that hadn't been done for a very long time. We have $1 billion from the recovery funds that are actually going to build road facilities at Yellowstone, at Yosemite, a whole host of other places where we are going to make some major improvements, in large part because of the president's leadership in this effort. So we have huge projects and huge plans, but we interface with so many people here in America, and are so much a part of the economic engine of this country.
The Recovery Act has been a real boom for us. It's been welcome dollars. The great thing about the way the National Park Service and Yellowstone approached the Recovery Act, the funding with that is we lined up a variety of projects that we already had in the queue of things that we wanted to do. And as that list of projects across the National Park Service matured, we wanted to make sure that we were putting a certain amount of that money into energy conservation projects, alternative energy projects, because we would reap the benefits of that.
And what we hope is that the focus of the President on this, some of the new initiatives coming out of the Interior Department and Secretary Salazar permit us to reinvigorate our own passionate interest in the national parks, to remind us that we are all co-owners of the most spectacular scenery on Earth, and our obligation as co-owners is to just go visit this property now and then, make sure it's being taken care of, and put it in our will for our posterity.
In Yellowstone, we have 2 seasons, winter and construction.
CCC camps, I wish I could see them all over the country. I hope that all over the country they're in as fine condition as the camps that I've seen today. I wish that I could take a couple of months off from the White House and come down here and live with them, because I know I'd get full of health the way they had. The only difference is that they put on an average of about 12 pounds apiece since they got here, and I'm trying to take off 12 pounds.
Men from the big city are finding work and happiness in this government conservation camp at Yellowstone. Far cry from the roar of the subject to that of Old Faithful, most famous geyser in the world.
Take your photos now. Photos now, it's at its tallest.
The YCC program spawned from the CCC from the 1930s. We then transformed that into the Youth Conservation Corps.
We teach these students to practice environmental stewardship as they become our leaders in the future.
Everyone working together as a community really gives me hope. When you find out that kids can actually work together and create something great, it makes you feel really good.
Helping students discover who they are and who they want to be in the future is one of the most important pieces.
At the age of 11, it was decided that me, my 2-year-old sister at the time, my grandmother, and my mother would take a trip throughout the continental United States. And when I think about that trip, the sight of the Grand Canyon, the sight of bison running through a stretch of plain in Yellowstone, it gave you a sense that this was something special, this country that we had. And it's seared into my memory in a way that very few things have.
He was telling his girls, and he was telling the First Lady about when he first saw this place, and he was telling us the stories of the bison and approaching a bison out in the park and other stories that he told us. He was thinking about a time in his life, now over 30 years ago, when he was at that same place. So it was a grand moment for me to be there with the President of Yellowstone.
You know, the thing I remember most was, driving by and seeing it was elk, and I remember bison, and in fact I ran up close to a bison. I took pictures of it.
It's never a good idea to approach bison closely.
We now live in a virtual world, particularly our children. We spend way too much time focused on what is not reality, and the parks offer the antidote.
I am amazed at the number of children in this country who have never seen such a thing as a panoramic vista, a place where you can ascend a high point and look around for 360 degrees and see no evidence of buildings or fences or farms or telephone lines, just sheer nature. And it's amazing the number of folks who have not experienced that. And I think places like this serve to rejuvenate and refresh and inspire us in those sorts of ways as we become more and more of a developed place.
the notion that collectively we come together and we say, you know, we're going to preserve some things that last beyond our individual lives, that we're going to pass that on, and that we have to do it together. You know, that's part of